Hey guys, this is Logo73. I am a system admin for a small private school. I actually got started in about 2008 when my administrator came to me and said, "We've noticed you're good at technology and surprise, you're the new system admin." At that point I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Didn't know anything about running a network, and so grown a lot over the past few years, researched a lot of articles and watched a lot of videos on YouTube and whatnot. So what I wanted to do is put together kind of a series of videos for the new admin trying to set up things and figure out what a network is, and kind of help people out so that they don't have to go through what I had to go through. So hopefully make things a little bit easier. I'm going to be setting up Windows Server 2016 on all of my lab Hyper-V machines. This machine specifically is running Windows Server 2012. When I went to set up the lab, it would not run 2016 because it's an older machine, and Hyper-V would not install. But it will install on the 2012. So for the base host machine that I'm using here, I'm going to use 2012, but when we actually set up the network, we're going to use Windows Server 2016 and Windows 10. So the first thing I wanted to do here in the first video, this one right here, is to give you basically a tour of my setup and kind of how I'm doing things. We'll be installing Hyper-V and .NET 3.0. And so just kind of getting the environment set and showing you exactly what I did to do that. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that I went and installed all the patches for Windows. And so if you're not familiar with this, you can go to Control Panel, right click down here on the Start menu, go to Control Panel. I usually just type Updates, and Windows Update will pop up. And all I did was take this and drag it over here, and now I can go directly there. So pretty easy to set up. I've already ran updates and installed everything today, about 240 I think patches at this point. So this should come back with nothing to install, but you want to go ahead and do that right at the beginning. I actually, in a production environment, I set this to download updates, but let me choose whether to install them, because you don't want to crash your computer in a live environment. Since this is just a test lab, I have it set on install updates automatically, but I do change this normally to where it doesn't install them until I've got time to fix a problem if I need to, if there's a bad patch that comes out. So I don't do that automatically. So other than that, I can go back here, and so we've installed all the updates, came back with none to install. So that's already done. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was basically my drive setup. And so I have a C drive that has the OS already installed, and we'll go over an installation of Windows Server as we set up the new machines. But I've already done this, and so my OS is installed on my host machine. I've also installed on this machine a second drive that I'm going to use for all the data. My Hyper-V machines, these are ISOs that I've downloaded with the operating systems that I'll be using. So all of my extra data will go on this drive. So I can, if I need to in the lab environment, even in a production environment, if I need to wipe out this operating system and start from scratch, all of my data is still on that second drive, and so I don't have to recreate all that. So great technique to use even in production environment. You want a second drive. You don't want your data hitting your OS and slowing down your server anyway. So you really do want to get into practice of separating those two things out. So I also have, these are just flash drives that are plugged in with the OS for 2012 and 2016 in case I need them. Eventually we'll get in and have ISOs. Actually, I've downloaded the ISOs already, but we can use that. We can mount the ISOs and pull the information off that too. So get into that a little bit later. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was Server Manager. So by default, that's already on your taskbar down here at the bottom. But if you don't have that, or you've removed that, unpinned it, you can right click on the start menu, and this is something that's you're going to use a lot as a system admin. But you can go to where's that at? I don't go this way a lot. Actually, I think I want to left click. Here we go. Go to Administrative Tools, and then you can go to Server Manager, and if you need to, you can pin that to the taskbar. So that's something I use quite often to double check some things. So I run that. I keep that pinned to the taskbar. So I'm going to go ahead and run Server Manager, and when it pops up, normally I think I removed it. There's normally a bar up here at the top. Here, maybe this? Yeah, okay, this is the way it looks by default. When I set some things up, I usually hide it. But this is kind of the setup steps that you'll go through. I don't need to know that, so I just go ahead and hide it. Another thing I do, I like to go into the Server Manager properties and do not start Server Manager automatically at login. Once you get into a production environment, you don't want to see that every time you come up, but you can turn that off. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And so this is normally what it looks like once I get those two things done. And so what I want to talk about is basically the basic server setup. And so I've gone in here and I've changed the computer name. You click change here, you can change the computer name, change the work group. Eventually you're going to connect computers to the domain. That's not set up yet, so we can't do that. And so the other thing I did was went in here under remote, and it's set to do not allow remote connections. I changed that to allow. Production environment, you want to keep this checked off. This is just a test lab, so I turned that off, but you want to have authenticated users being able to remote desktop in. Because this is will be on a Hyper-V machine, I've had trouble remote desktoping into this particular environment. So in my experience, I went out and researched being able to RDP into a Hyper-V machine, and I came up with, I found an article. I leave breadcrumbs quite often, and that's what this is. It's just a simple text document. You can right click and go new and text document and create a text document anywhere you are. And you want to get in the habit of doing that as a system admin, because a year from now you won't remember what you did. So I know that I can click on this document and come in here to this article right here. So I'm going to try to collect all that. There we go. And I'm going to copy this, and if I want to go back and look at what I did, I'm going to come to this in a little bit later. But I can go back and reread this article. So I left myself a breadcrumb to be able to go back and read how to RDP into a Hyper-V machine. And so if you read down through this, you're going to see that, go ahead and close that. You're going to see that it eventually talks about this code right here that I'm going to copy, and you can go into, right click and go into command prompt as an admin and paste this, and it doesn't hurt to go ahead and run this again, so I'm going to go ahead and run the rule. And so it ran this rule 6, and I'm able to now RDP into this particular machine. So that's something I had to do for this lab setup. So you're going to want to, the main reason I go over that is not because you maybe need it for your environment, but you're going to want to get in the habit of doing this. I do this quite often, where I will put down an article and the code that I need, and then just on a simple notepad document, and that way a year from now when I'm going over my setup stuff and maybe changing some things when school's out of session, I remember what I did. So that's just one I pulled down from my live environment that I needed before, and so I needed it again and was able to not spend an hour trying to research it again. So that's pretty beneficial. Okay, so the next thing, firewall's on by default, and so that's already set. Remote management, I just went over that. It takes you to the same, let's see, remote desktop, that's what I want. So computer name was here, remote was at the end, and so we've already talked about that. NIC teaming is something that maybe we can talk about later, but it's basically using 2 Ethernet ports, NICs, on your server. You're basically teaming them up together to it increases your speed, but the big thing is redundancy. If one of those lines goes down, you have a second line coming into your computer or to your server, and so you don't lose connection. You're still able to keep that server going in a production environment. We can't do that here. It's only got 1 NIC on the machine, but we might be able to talk about that a little bit later. That'd be a different video. I've gone ahead and put in our Ethernet address. This is actually outside my network in what's called a DMZ. So my modem has several ports on it. It's plugged directly into the modem. I can access it from outside. I'm not going through my network, so this will it'll be blurred out, so you won't be able to see the IP address. The machine that I'm using talks about Windows updates here. The next thing, I always keep that turned off. But the next thing I had to do in my environment, Internet Explorer, when you come in, you get a lot of security stuff. So I went and changed this to off for administrators. In a production environment, you don't want to do any web surfing on your server. Do not use your server as a console or your PC that you log into every morning and drink your coffee. You want to do that on a client computer, a Windows machine, and use your server just for the service that provides it for it. If you get a virus on your server, that's gonna ruin your world. So this is, again, lab environment. I need to pull things down into this environment, and it's the only machine. So I've actually installed Google Chrome, and I've turned off the internet security. Do not do either one of those things on a live production machine. I'm going to go ahead and change this for my sake. Time zone, I am in the central time zone, and so there we go. And that should be changed now, and I'm not going to activate this because, again, it's lab. I think I mentioned before, maybe not, 8 gigs of RAM, and it's totaling the 2 hard drives together. I don't have that much in any one hard drive, but the sum of the 2, that's what I got. So this is all set up, and so the basics there are good to go. And then we are all set up to start installing Hyper-V. So actually didn't need to close that. I'm going to go back to Server Manager. I'm going to come up here and manage and add a role and feature. And I normally turn this off. You can read through that, and so I skip it. From now on, it won't show up. We're always going to do a role-based or feature-based installation. It's the only we can get into this later, but it's the only computer on this machine. We can't remote into any other machines, so we only have one choice. We're going to install Hyper-V, and it's going to automatically add some roles. Now this is in the next section, but it's saying because you're installing Hyper-V, you need to add these roles. So we're going to add those features. And so these are the roles, and we're going to go next. And now we have some features that we can install. One of the things that I always install on my servers is this .NET Framework 3.5. It also installs 2.0 and 3.0. More times than not, I need that feature on just about every server I ever set up. So first installation, I always install those things, that one checkbox. So that role I'm going to add, and click Next. And then it's for the Hyper-V, it's going to ask me what network NIC do I want to use, and I only have the one on this particular machine. If you have several, you're going to have to make sure you pick the right one there. And so Next. And do we want to do live migrations? Again, this is maybe a later video, but I'm going to go ahead and set it up. And Kerberos, we're going to turn that on and allow live migrations. This machine will not be able to do it, but I'll probably make a video later. In my live production environment, I've got 2 servers that the processors allow the live migration to happen from one to another. Maybe show you that a little later in a different video. So I'm going to click next. This is where you set up where you want everything to save. And so in this setup, I am going to come in here to my data drive. I just went down here to File Explorer and Data Drive, and I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this Hyper-V. And so a little trick I learned, if you go into this folder and come up here and click, it gives you the code to put in here. So we're going to copy this and close that. And so now I can come in here, and on this one it installs it in a Hyper-V folder and then a subfolder virtual disk. So I'm going to keep that and just put this in here, put a backslash in there, and then this one you just want it to be just Hyper-V. So this is the setup I normally do, with my hard disk going in its own folder and everything else just going to the Hyper-V folder. So I'm going to click next. And do we want to restart the server if it needs to? I'm going to click yes. I don't believe it will need it. This is not something that you would want to do in a live environment. So I teach at a school. I'm the system admin at a school. And in a school day, if I'm installing something, I don't want my computer to restart in the middle of the day, because we're going to maybe lose functionality. So this is maybe something you want to go ahead and install, and then later that night maybe go ahead and restart the server if it needs it. So usually in a live environment, you would not turn on automatic restart. Okay. The next thing, I know that this .frame network is going to need the original flash drive to be able to install the information that it needs here. So we're going to go ahead and click alternate source, and it tells you right here the folder that it's looking for, but it's not necessarily the E drive. So again, I'm going to come down here, and this is 2012 R2, so it was sources and this SXS folder, and again I'm going to use that little shortcut, and it was E. So unfortunately I can't copy that, so I'm going to copy it here. I'm going to drop this in, and so now that should be the correct file location. So we can click OK and click next, or install, I'm sorry, and this will go through the process of installing the .NET framework and the Hyper-V role that I just asked it to do. Now this is going to take a minute, so I'm going to pause the video so it's not full of useless information, and when it's done I'll come back online. Okay, we're back now. I did remember one detail incorrectly. The server did need to restart, and that makes sense now that I think about it. Hypervisor is boots up first, and then the operating system boots on top of that. So it did need to restart to be able to fully install the Hyper-V. And so all I did was, when it came back up, I opened up Server Manager, and it finished the installation. It says now that's it has now succeeded. And so over here on the left you see Hyper-V as one of the tabs now. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, and actually Hyper-V is fully functional at this point. So the next thing I would want to do, you can go into Tools and open the Hyper-V Manager. Also show you that you can go to the Start menu and go to Administrative Tools, and it should also be in this list right there. And so when you open Hyper-V Manager, the first thing that I would do is right click on this and pin this to the taskbar, because this is something, if you're using Hyper-V, you're going to use this a lot. And so I'm going to move it over here to the left and go ahead and close some things out here. Let's just close everything down. This is a message that the installation succeeded, so we can close that and close Server Manager and get back to our desktop here. So in our future videos, we'll just simply be able to come into the Hyper-V Manager and this functionality will open, and we'll be able to add some machines, add some hard drives, and this is where we'll start to build our network, our virtual network. So for now, we're done with Hyper-V for this particular video. The last thing I wanted to end on is when I went into my D drive, you notice that I have some ISOs here where I've started to download. I've got SQL Server in here. I've got Win 10 for education. I've got the 2012 and 2016 operating systems for Server Manager. I thought I do. Okay, right there. I already downloaded Configuration Manager, indicated that's something we'll get to later. But so I've started to download some ISOs. So the last thing I want to talk about as a system admin is, especially if you're working with a school or a non-for-profit, volume licensing is something that you want to take a look at. I'm not going to log in and show you my account specifically, but this website, you're going to want to get a hold of Microsoft and get to where you can download the software that you need off of their website, and it comes down as an ISO. And when you're working with Hyper-V, you can mount those ISOs directly to a machine and install. So it's very handy to be able to work with that. The other thing is you can work off flash drives, you can work off of CDs. I haven't used the CD in several years, but it still is a viable option. As you get into Server 2000, I think at 2012, I stopped being able to use this DVD because it was too large. So you're going to have to convert to flash drives, or the best way to do it really is just being able to download an ISO right from Microsoft. So this is something you're going to want to look into. The licensing, it'll vary depending on your organization, but very, very useful tool if you can get a license with the company or school that you're with. So that's something you're going to want to look into. So this is going to finish the first video setting up the lab environment and installing Hyper-V. I'm going to put some of those links down in the comments, so you'll be able to copy and paste those if you need those to look up stuff for yourself. Of course, any comments in the sections, I'll try to get to those. And so the next section, we'll start to look at hopefully some mapping of our network, something when you think about how you're going to lay out your network before you actually start installing servers and clients and starting to make that functional. So that'll be our next goal to tackle, is your network mapping. All right, thanks for watching.